Hello everyone. Today's video I'm going to be reading chapter 11 of The Lady Vanishes by Ethel Lina White, and I've come to a different location. As you can probably see some of the bluebells in the background. I thought instead of you seeing my face, you don't need to keep seeing my face doing these videos, that I would just record. So it takes me about sort of 15 minutes to read each chapter, but I would just come and do some recordings. So instead of seeing me, you've got the beautiful backdrop of the wood here in Shropshire, with this abundance, this fecundity of bluebells, with this incredible bluey purple carpet which extends all through the wood here. So I thought you'd much rather see that, and this is my favourite, one of my favourite places in the world. It's just so peaceful, so tranquil, just a real riot of colour and joy. And I think I like the fact as well that it's temporary. You know, it's only here for a few weeks to a month, a year, for us to appreciate it, and then it will come back again next year, but it's not here all the time, which I think is quite beautiful. And it's seasonality, which I think we get away from a lot in the modern world, and I feel like moving out to the countryside, I'm noticing the seasons more, I'm embracing them more, I'm enjoying that idea of the life cycle. So yeah, less of me talking, more of just the beautiful bird song, the bluebell. Unfortunately there's no smell-o-vision, because I think just it's incredible aroma. But I hope for anybody who can't get outside or who can't get to a bluebell, or any of them who wants to see it, I hope you like this footage. So here's chapter 11 of The Lady Vanishes, and some shots of just the most incredible haven of beauty and vibrancy that nature does far better than anything else. So yes, enjoy the chapter.
Chapter 11. Needle in a Haystack. Iris opened her lips only to close them again. She had the helpless feeling of being shouted down by some terrific blast of sound. The Baroness had made a statement which was an outrage on the evidence of her senses, but it was backed up by the force of an overpowering authority. As she held the girl's eye, challenging her denial, Iris looked at the leaden eyelids, the deep lines graven from nose to chin, the heavy, obstinate chin. The lips were drawn down in a grimace, which reminded her of a mask of the muse of tragedy. She realised that further protest was useless. The Baroness would flatten down any attempt at opposition with relentless pressure. The most she could do was to acknowledge defeat with a shrug which disdained further argument. Her composure was only bluff, for she felt utterly bewildered as she sank back in her seat. She was scarcely conscious of slides of twilight scenery streaming past the window, or of the other passengers. A village shot out of the shadows and vanished again in the dimness. She caught the flash of a huddle of dark roofs and the white streak of a little river which boiled under a hooded bridge. The next second the church tower and wooden houses were left behind as the express rocked on its way back to England. It lurched and shrieked as though in unison with the tangle of Iris's thoughts. "No, Miss Froy, absurd. The woman must be mad. Does she take me for a fool?" But why does she say it? Why? It was this lack of motive which worried her most. Miss Froy was such a harmless little soul that there could be no reason for her suppression. She was on friendly terms with everyone. Yet the fact remained that she had disappeared, for Iris was positive now that she would not come back to the carriage. In a sudden fit of nerves, she sprang to her feet. She must be somewhere on the train, she argued. I'll find her. She would not admit it, but her own confidence was flawed by the difficulty of finding a reason for Miss Froy's absence. She had taken Iris under her wing, so that it was entirely out of line with her character as a kind little busybody for her to withdraw in such an abrupt and final manner. Does she think I might be sickening for some infectious disease, she wondered. After all, she's so terribly keen to get back to her old parents and the dog that she wouldn't dare run risk of being held up. Naturally, she would sacrifice me. Her progress down the train was a most unpleasant experience. It had been difficult when Miss Froy acted the part of a fussy little tug and had cleared a passage for her. Now that more passengers had grown tired of sitting in her cramped compartments and had emerged to stretch or smoke, the corridor was closely packed with tourists as a melon with seeds. Iris did not know how to ask them to step aside, and she did not like to push. Moreover, the fact that she was attractive did not escape the notice of some of the men. Each time a swerve of the express caused her to lurch against some susceptible stranger, he usually believed that she was making overtures. Although she grew hot with annoyance, her chief emotion was one of futility. She had no hope of finding Miss Foy in such confusion. Whenever she passed each fresh compartment to peer inside, she always saw the same blur of faces. Because she was beginning to run a temperature, these faces appeared as bleared and distorted as creations of a nightmare. It was relief when she worked her way down the train in an unavailing search to see the vicar and his wife in one of the crowded carriages. They were sitting opposite to each other. Mr. Barnes had closed his eyes and his face was set. In spite of his sunburn, it was plain that he was far from well and was exerting his willpower to subdue his symptoms. His wife watched him with strained attention. She looked wan and miserable, as though, in imagination, she was sharing his every pang of train sickness. She did not smile when Iris struggled inside and spoke to her. "Sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for my friend." "Oh, yes?" There was the familiar forced brightness in Mrs. Barnes's voice, but her eyes were tragic. "You remember her?" prompted Iris. "She sent the waiter with your tea." The vicar came to life. "It was kind indeed," he said. "Will you give her my special thanks?" "When I find her," promised Iris. "She went out of the carriage some time ago and she hasn't come back." "I haven't noticed her past the window," said Mrs. Barnes. "Perhaps she went to wash. Anyway, she couldn't possibly be lost." Iris could see that she was concentrating on her husband and had no interest in some unknown woman. "Can I find her for you?" offered the vicar manfully, struggling to his feet. "Certainly not." His wife's voice was sharp. "Don't be absurd, Kenneth. You don't know what she looks like." "That's true. I should be more hindrance than help." The vicar sank back gratefully and looked up at Iris with a forced smile. "Isn't it humiliating to be such a wretched traveller?" he asked. "I wouldn't talk," advised his wife. Iris took the hint and went out of the compartment. She too considered the vicar's weakness was a major misfortune. He was not only a man of high principle, but she was sure that he possessed imagination and sympathy, yet she was unable to appeal to him for help because nature had laid him low. Because she was beginning to fear that she faced failure, she grew more frantic with determination to find Miss Foy. If she failed, she was loaded with a heavy responsibility. Of all the people in the train, she alone seemed conscious of the disappearance of a missing passenger. She shrank from the prospect of trying to arouse these callous strangers from their apathy. As she clung to rails and was buffeted by the impact of other tourists pushing their way past her, she hated them all. In her strung-up condition, she could not realise that these people might experience her own sensations were they suddenly placed in a crowded London tube or New York subway and jostled by seemingly hostile and indifferent strangers. When she reached the reserved portion of the train, the blind was still pulled down over the Todhunter's window, but she recognised the Miss Flood porters in one of the reserved coupés. They sat on different sides of the tiny compartment, each with her feet stretched out on the seat. The elder lady wore horn-rimmed glasses and was reading a Chorchnitch, while Miss Rose smoked a cigarette. They looked very content with life, and although kind-hearted, the sight of others standing in the corridors subtly enhanced their appreciation of their own comfort. Smug, thought Iris bitterly. They made her realise her own position. She reminded herself that her place too was in a reserved compartment instead of fighting her way into the privacy of strange people. "Why am I taking it?" she wondered as she met the unfriendly glance of the ladies. Miss Rose's was perceptibly more frigid, as though she were practising gradations in preparation for the cut direct at Victoria Station. At last she had combed the train with the exception of the restaurant car. Now that the tea was finished, it was invaded by men who wanted to drink and smoke in comfort. As she lingered at the entrance to make sure that Miss Foy was not inside, seeking her soulmate of whom she had spoken, a hopeful young man touched Iris's arm. He said something unintelligible, which he translated as an invitation to refreshment, and leered into her face. Furious at the liberty, she shook him off and was on the point of turning away, when amid the rumble of masculine voices she distinguished the distinctive vowels of an Oxford accent. She was trying to locate it when she caught sight of the spade-bearded doctor. His bald, domed head, seen through the murk of smoke, reminded her of a moon rising through the mist. His face was blanched and bony, his dead eyes were magnified by his thick glasses. As they picked her out with an impersonal gaze, she felt as though she'd been pinned down and classified as a type. Suddenly, for no reason at all, she thought of the doctor in Miss Freud's tale of horror.
So that is the end of chapter 11 of The Lady Vanishes. I hope you liked that. I'll be back with chapter 12 soon to find out what next is going to happen to Iris Carr. I will try and find a location that is anywhere near as beautiful as the Bluebell would, but that's going to be very difficult. Oh, tree branch. Yeah, and I'll be back with the next chapter, chapter 12, very soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing my favourite place. Well, one of my favourite places in the world, which has been offering me great comfort and solace and joy during this time. And I really wanted to share it with you guys. So, yep, take care. I will be back with chapter 12 soon. Stay safe. Bye guys, bye.